Thank you, Brendan, Representative Boyle, and Mark for putting together Blue Collar Caucus. Just to reimagine ourselves, what we should be doing here is focusing on jobs. Jobs, which is the best social program I've ever been with. I entered my professional life as an electrician, as an electrical apprentice. Went through the other four-year school. It was called an apprenticeship. I worked on bridges, refineries, pipelines throughout the Delaware Valley. I understood how tough it is sometimes for people to make it. When work got slow, we got laid off. We collected unemployment. Those are the struggles that men and women in our great country are going through each and every day. And if anything, this last election cycle reminded us of that. That sometimes the dignity of being able to take care of your family, send your kids to school, and retire with dignity is the most important thing we can do. I've seen firsthand what happens with minimum wage. They tend to think it's all a bunch of kids flipping hamburgers. Well, it's much more than that. It's a woman that I spoke to who had a child 8 years old who had to work two jobs just to make sure that in the winter, when her daughter needed a coat for winter, that she could take care of her. And she recalled to us that how badly she felt that her daughter's teacher for PTA wanted her to come in and help. And she had to decide whether or not to keep food on her table or participate in her child's school. That's a tough decision when we both want to help them. When we look at what we have done as a country as compared to elsewhere in the world, it's very different when we look at the blue collar, particularly in the building trades where I came from. Throughout Europe, particularly in Switzerland and Germany, they look as working with your hand as just the same dignity as going through college. This country doesn't always do that. Guidance counselors tend to push them to go to college as the only measurement. College isn't for everybody. I have three brothers. They went through the traditional college route. I decided I really enjoyed working with my hands. I became an electrician. Those jobs I were on over 20 years ago. I still talk to my kids about it today. The dignity of working with your hands. This country is starting to change, particularly when you need an electrician. Your lights are out in your house, Brendan. Who do you call? That electrician's worth his weight in gold, isn't? And I know your story. Parents who came over here as first generation and living the American dream, and they have to be so proud of you. And Mark, in your district, those refineries, they're important for jobs as they are in mine. I think we absolutely have to keep the focus on making sure that we have renewables, that we have clean energy. But we also understand with each of those decisions comes with whether or not somebody's going to be able to go home and say, honey, I lost my job today. Today was a remarkable day. The first withdrawal of a nominee for the Department of Labor. And I guess this is where, during the election cycle, where I see the difference. It's very clear that the president wanted to talk about jobs, good jobs, putting America back to work. And then we have the secretary nominee put up who talks about minimum wage is a bad thing, talks about robots are things you don't have argument with. He wants to outsource. That's not the way to rebuild the economy. Brenda, you talked about the discrepancy between those who work for a living, the average worker on the line, and those who are the CEOs. See, when I grew up, there was implied partnership with so many of those companies. Those who went to work in a first-generation company, that CEO knew every employee's name. But time after time, when that company gets sold, that disconnect comes in. They forget about that. And that's where those relationships, that partnership that is so important, starts to break down. We had a conversation in our Workforce and Education Committee the other day about the NLRB, which is the group from the Department of Labor that judges whether or not elections with unions are done fairly. And there was a suggestion somehow that they're not being treated fairly. Couldn't be any further from the truth. If workers want to have a voice, they should have that voice and choose whether or not they want to join with the union. That is the American way, that democracy. Yet the nominee for Labor wanted to do away with the NLRB. In fact, when we look at the total case history, it's like putting the fox in charge of the hen house. Unless, of course, you own the hen house, and then it's okay. So I just, again, want to finish up by saying to Mark and Brendan how appreciative I am of keeping this focus on the forefront of what we do here in Congress. I created a building trades caucus along with a colleague, McKinley, out of West Virginia. So we could try to move this forward, create an infrastructure package that puts America back to work and keeps our roads, our bridges, and our grid safe. So let's remember one thing: fair day's pay for fair day's work and the dignity of a job. And we appreciate what you've done, and I yield back.